Hello, it's Delusion Dispeller. I'm going to be reading from Safe People by Doctors Cloud and Townsend. We are on chapter 3, and we're learning about interpersonal traits of unsafe people. Albert Einstein's widow was being interviewed about her husband. One reporter asked her if she understood his theory of relativity. She replied, "I don't know Einstein's theory, but I know Einstein." Mrs. Einstein knew her husband in a way no one else did. She was in a relationship with him. In the same way, we can learn a great deal about belief by how they are in relationship with us. In the last chapter, we learned about the 11 personal traits of unsafe people. In this chapter, we look at 9 interpersonal traits of unsafe people. While personal traits describe who we are, interpersonal traits describe how we connect. These interpersonal traits are about how people operate in relationships, how they move close or pull away, and how they build up or destroy. Use this chapter to help you examine the people in your life. As you observe them through the grid of these 9 traits, you will begin to see the difference between the safe and unsafe people in your life. Number 1, unsafe people avoid closeness instead of connecting. We were created for intimacy, to connect with someone with heart, soul, and mind. Intimacy occurs when we are open, vulnerable, and honest. For these qualities help us to be close to each other. We know each other at deep levels when we share our real feelings, failures, and hurts. This kind of sharing helps us to feel that we are not alone in the world. We are meant to have intimacy with God and with people. If we do not, we experience isolation, even if we are in some kind of relationship. Time with someone does not a connection make. Only true sharing and intimacy create connection. You need to question long-term relationships in which you do not get to know the other person. If you spend significant amounts of time with an individual and still feel far away from him or her, something is wrong. You do not have a connection that is nourishing to the soul. Furthermore, this could be a signal that real danger is. People who are not able to get close often act out in isolation, in affairs, two-faced betrayal, broken confidences and trusts, addictions, and a whole host of other problem dynamics. Many marriages have this dynamic at work. Like a silent killer, this lack of intimacy eats away at the foundation of the relationship. Because there are no overt problems, nothing is said. Things are fine, but then one spouse discovers that the other one is having an affair or has an addiction that surprises everyone. When this happens, the external structure of the relationship, the one everyone thought was so good, breaks down. Usually, spouses know deep inside that things weren't really all that good. They had a nagging feeling of disconnection, but they did not know exactly what to do about it, so they continued to go along the same direction in life until the catastrophe brought everything tumbling down. Wayne, a friend of mine at church, had this effect on me. He was a pleasant enough fellow. We'd talk, go out with our wives, and have occasional lunches. He always seemed interested and caring. Something wasn't there. I couldn't put words on my nagging doubt for the longest time. Finally, one day we were talking over lunch, and I noticed for the first time that Wayne never ever discussed his deeper issues, his struggles, his pains, his failures, and he had no idea what to do about mine. Wayne was bright and very interested in theology and spiritual matters, but there was a vacuum in the inner parts of our relationship. When I'd bring up a problem in my life or express sadness or fear, Wayne would simply go away. It was a little eerie. I'd be sharing something personal, then lob the conversational ball over to Wayne, and he'd look blank, be quiet, and then start talking about something else. He wasn't being hostile at all. He just had no place in his head for the deeper connection. One night, I received a call from his wife. She told me Wayne had been a closet addict of prescription pills for years, and tonight was having an adverse drug reaction. I arranged the emergency help he needed and got him into treatment. Wayne's addiction wasn't a huge surprise to me. In fact, it helped me answer some questions. Apparently, he handled all his feelings, needs, and relational struggles through drugs. He wasn't a bad guy, just someone who had no ability to be intimate. If you are uneasy about a relationship, ask yourself, does this relationship breed more togetherness or more isolation within me? If you feel alone in the relationship, that's not a good sign. But remember, the first person to look at is yourself. Your sense of detachment may be from some block inside of you. Sometimes our own fears and conflicts make it difficult for us to feel connected to someone. The problem can be ours, it can be theirs, and it can be both. Number 2, unsafe people are only concerned about I instead of we. I met Barry, another Christian therapist, at a convention. We seemed to have a lot in common: values, professional interests, and the like. And my wife liked his wife, so we tried to spend some time together. Things changed after a few engagements. Although we had a lot to talk about, I found myself dreading upcoming events with Barry. I'd think of ways to avoid him, get out of the appointment, or cut our time short. I really berated myself for this, thinking that I was just being selfish. I forced myself to spend time with him, thinking the extra time would increase our connection. It didn't work. More and more, I dreaded seeing Barry. My stomach would literally get upset when I said yes to another evening with him. One night, I was on the phone with Barry, and I had to cut the conversation short. I was leaving town the next day, and my family needed some attention. It was a little awkward because he was in the middle of a story about himself and a friend at work. But I said, I need to get back to you on this. I've got to go and be with my family. But Barry continued his story at the same pace, not even drawing a breath. It was as if I said, please go on. I figured I hadn't been clear enough. I said, Barry, gotta go. He didn't miss a lick, saying, so I figured it was time to shop for a new car. I was getting a little angry. The family was waiting in the family room for me to read stories, so I moved from words to actions. I said, Barry, I'm hanging up now. Apparently, he didn't believe it, because as the receiver was leaving my ear, I could faintly hear him say, yeah, I've got a big weekend coming up. The relationship had its problems after that, as I learned he was hurt by my abruptness. But I just didn't have time for him to wind down. What's more, I wasn't sure if Barry had the ability to wind down. Barry was a nice guy, but I realized we weren't connecting. What I thought was a relationship was actually auditory self-gratification. I served as an audience to Barry's conversation with himself. What an empty experience. It was if unsafe people are self-centered, safe people are relationship-centered. And that priority shows itself in the all-important action of empathy. Safe people are empathic. A genuine connection is a mutual give and take of caring that flows between individuals. Both people bring their lives, loves, joys, and sorrows to the connection. Each brings her needs, yet has a deep interest in the life of the other person. In safe relationships, empathy is a large part of the equation. We literally enter the other person's head and attempt to understand how he feels, what he believes, and how he thinks. Empathy is walking in the moccasins of another person and not judging him until we can see what suffering he's been through to get to the point he's at. Empathy is not easy. It involves letting go of your opinion and what you're needing in the relationship so that you can enter the world of the other person, if only for a brief time. We can't stay in the empathic position permanently because we could lose ourselves, but empathy is what makes a relationship real and safe. Jesus taught about empathy, but in a surprising way. In everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets, Matthew 7:12. This is a startling teaching because he didn't condemn our needs as selfish. Instead, he used them as a starting point for learning how to love. In other words, he was saying, you know how terrible you feel sometimes. That's also how others feel. You know how being loved and understood by another person helps you deal with those feelings? That's also what helps others. Give them what you're also needing. If we're all taking our needs to safe people, and those safe people are taking their needs to us, love is created, and the law and the prophets are fulfilled. Safe people act on their empathy. Empathy leads to action. When you see the pain of another, you want to help. God created you that way. We spend time listening to a friend's struggle, not because that will make her like us, but because she needs to be understood. We help someone with a problem, not so that we'll feel better, but because she's in trouble. If you want to know how safe someone is, ask yourself, is this person with me for him or for us? It's no sin to bring your needs to the connection, but it is a sin to exploit the relationship for your own ends only. Look for these warning signs. When he helps me, he uses it later to get something from me. I never hear from her unless she's in trouble. I feel like a mirror, as if it's my job to listen and approve. I'm constantly on the giving end, financially, time, resources. When my needs come up, he treats them superficially and then comes back to himself. When there's trouble, it will generally show in one person being the chronic giver and the other person being the chronic taker. Love seeks the good of the other. It is not self-seeking. 1 Corinthians 13:5. When you evaluate your relationships, look for people who show genuine concern for your welfare. Then make that concern known in concrete actions. Number 3, unsafe people resist freedom instead of encouraging it. We can easily cut to the chase on this interpersonal trait. Ask yourself, what does a person do with my no? I was in a support group that met regularly for emotional and spiritual connections. We would all work hard on issues, then reconvene the next week. However, since there was a great deal of authentic caring among the members, those who could would at times get together for dinner or coffee afterward and decompress. Over time, the members had grown to enjoy being with each other. I guess this bonding stuff really works, one member said to me. One night, however, Josie, a married mother, said, "Rain check for me. I gotta help my kids with homework. See you guys next week." Brian, another member of the group, said, "Be that way then." His comment was halfway funny, and a couple of people laughed. Josie didn't laugh. She was hurt, but she didn't say anything until the next meeting. When we met, she told Brian, "I know you were probably joking, but it stung. I spent all week thinking that if I can't go for coffee, then I can't be in the group. I felt like I did when my mother would withdraw if I didn't agree." Brian felt really bad about hurting Josie and assured her that he had been joking. Then he said, "But there's probably some truth to it. I do tend to feel abandoned when someone can't be with me, and I don't like the sadness, so I make sarcastic digs instead." Brian owned up to his own unsafe actions, thus becoming safer. He had a hard time hearing no from others. People would sense his resistance and they would then distance themselves from him. Brian is becoming safer and safer. But it's those who don't see this in themselves who can be quite destructive. In their eyes, you become bad for being separate from them. Love protects the separateness of the other. When we are in a relationship, the we is still you and me. A safe connection involves two people trusting, opening up, and being honest with each other. Yet, the second great theme of the relationship after connection is separateness. Separateness is the ability to maintain spiritual and emotional property lines called boundaries between you and others. Separate people take responsibility for what is theirs, and they don't take ownership for what isn't theirs. When we are separate, we bring good things close to our soul and keep bad things away from us. God created us to stand against what is not from Him. No one who practices deceit will dwell in my house. No one who speaks falsely will stand in my presence. Psalms 101:7. Love withers and dies without separateness. It's simply impossible to connect if you are not free to disagree. That kind of love is compliance, and people pleasing is not real love. Am I now trying to win the approval of men or God? Asks Paul. Or am I trying to please men? If I were still trying to please men, I would not be a servant of Christ. Galatians 1:10. The opposite of separateness is enmeshment. Enmeshing relationships are those in which one person is swallowed up in the needs of the other. In enmeshment, one person feels threatened by the individuality of the other and actively seeks to control the other by intimidating or manipulating him. In an enmeshing relationship, together is bliss for one, and apart is hell for one. Enmeshment emphasizes similarities and discourages differences in people. Safe people encourage, value, and nurture the separateness of other people. They understand that they need their own free choices and that they need to protect the freedom of other people too. You will always find that the best connections embrace the individual concerns of the other person. Here are some things to look for in determining safety in this area. Do they respect my no when I state it? Do they withdraw emotionally when I say no? Do they get hurt and make me feel guilty when I say no? Do they have a life, interests, hobbies, friends separate from me? Do they encourage me to have a separate life too? Now, you may have never said no in your relationships. This problem may be more your issue than your friends. So test the waters, disagree, be honest, tell the truth. Choose a value, event, or emotion distinct from his or hers and see what happens. You'll learn a lot about the level of safety in your relationships. Number 4, unsafe people flatter us instead of confronting us. This relational trait is a little more difficult to spot than the previous one. That's because an unsafe person can make you feel very, very good, and a safe person can make you feel very, very bad. It can get confusing. How can you tell the difference? For several years, I waited tables at various restaurants to pay for graduate school. It was enjoyable work. The money was good, and I liked the people I worked with. Successful waiters and waitresses come in two flavors: personality and function. The personality types are charming, attentive, and make you feel like your $20 dinner is an evening at Casablanca. The functional types get food there on time and don't bother you. The atmosphere is your own responsibility. Crystal was, without a doubt, the finest personality waitress I have ever met. All the customers adored her, and the staff as well. She would compliment us on anything and everything. How is school going? You're in such a fascinating field. Where'd you get that gorgeous shirt? If you came into our restaurant, you would want Crystal to be your waitress. Well, one night before work, another waiter came alongside me and said, "Why did you hurt Crystal? The whole staff is upset with you." I was baffled. "What did I do?" I asked. "You forgot to take care of a table for her and she got in trouble with the boss," he said, glaring. He was right. I remembered I had forgotten the customer, but it had happened several nights ago. I'd seen Crystal many times since then, and she said nothing. I went to her and apologized, saying, "Why didn't you say anything to me?" She replied, "I didn't want to hurt your feelings." I tried to put it together. Crystal liked stroking me and avoided confronting me because that would hurt. Yet she told the staff, and that hurt me more. Crystal could be positive, but she couldn't be directly negative. Sounds familiar. I know somebody like that myself. Okay, safe relationships are just not about trust, support, and sharing. They are also about truth, righteousness, and honesty. God uses people not only to nurture us, but also to open our eyes to sins, selfishness, and denial in us. Love also means saying, "I hold this against you," as Jesus did when he confronted the churches. Revelations 2:4, 14, and 20. Being confronted on character issues isn't pleasant. It hurts our self-image. It humbles us, but it doesn't harm us. Loving confrontations protect us from our blindness and self-destructiveness. Just as a mother rushes out into a busy street and grabs her child out of the traffic, the loving confrontation stops us from walking into disaster. There is a major difference between confronters and strokers. Confronters, safe ones, not critical parent types, risk our leaving them to tell us unneeded truth. They jeopardize comfort to give us honest love. Strokers, in contrast, lull us to sleep by idealizing our specialness. As long as you feel good, they're happy. This is more addictive than loving, and it certainly isn't safe. This isn't a diatribe against praise. We all need it. Let another praise you and not your own mouth, someone else and not your own lips. Proverbs 27:2. But praise affirms the truth. Strokers, however, avoid the truth by exclusively praising. Beware of people who only tell you your good points, justifying it by a desire to be positive. They aren't loving you enough to tell you when your attitude or behavior is driving your life over a cliff, even though you desperately need to know it. Number 5, unsafe people condemn us instead of forgiving us. Think about this in light of some things going on right now, by the way. Several weeks ago, I, John, forgot to bring my son Ricky, who's 5, a toy I promised him. He was hurt, and I asked him to forgive me. He said, "What does forgive mean?" I said, "It means you're not mad anymore, so we can be friends." He thought for a second and said, "Okay, I forgive you." A few nights later, we were having family prayer. When Ricky's turn came, he said, "God, it was way too hot outside today, and I'm kind of frustrated, but I forgive you." Ricky is learning the nature of forgiveness. When people care about each other, forgiveness restores and reconciles. Forgiveness is the glue of love, making it possible for love to do what it does best: to bear all things, believe all things, hopes all things, endure all things. 1 Corinthians 13:7. These tasks are absolutely impossible without forgiveness. We're just too hard to live with otherwise. The Bible talks about forgiveness as a legal term. It means to cancel a debt. This is a good one, guys. Listen up. Forgiveness means to cancel a debt. This is the central idea behind Jesus' death for us. He paid the penalty for our sins so that we would not have to. Safe relationships are centered and grounded in forgiveness. When you have a friend with the ability to forgive you for hurting her or letting her down, something deeply spiritual occurs in the transaction between you two. You actually experience a glimpse of the deepest nature of God himself. People who forgive can and should also be people who confront. What is not confessed can't be forgiven. God himself confronts our sins and shows us how we wound him. I have been hurt by their adulterous hearts, who turned away from me, and by their eyes which played the harlot after their idols. Ezekiel 6:9. When we are made aware of how we hurt a loved one, then we can be reconciled. Therefore, you shouldn't discount someone who has something against you, labeling him as unsafe. He might actually be attempting to come closer in love, in the way that the Bible tells us we are to do. Keep that in balance, guys. Because sometimes somebody that you don't want close to you because you are labeling them as unsafe really is unsafe. So just kind of weigh all things and keep things in balance, like I always tell you. When we are forgiven by a safe person, several things happen. He knows our failings. He neither minimizes nor excuses our sin. His love for us is greater than our transgression. He marks paid in full and lets it go. He stays close to us and doesn't abandon us. That's why the forgiving person is safe. He sees our wrong, yet loves us beyond it. And that love helps heal and transform us into the person God intended. Receiving forgiveness when we know we've truly blown it is a humbling and growth-producing experience. It's the only thing better than forgiving someone else. On the other hand, an unsafe person who is unable to forgive can be very destructive. Instead of forgiving, she condemns. She centers on my failings. She won't let go of the past, even when I've confessed, repented, and made restitution. She uses my weakness to avoid looking at hers. She sees me as morally inferior to her. She desires justice more than intimacy. By the way, this goes for guys too, not just girls. They're just saying she because they said he for the other one. But it goes for she or he. Unsafe people are often good at identifying your weaknesses. They can quote the minute and hour you hurt them and recall the scene in intimate detail and living color. Like a good attorney, they have the entire case mapped out. And you are judged guilty. Yes, we need to be confronted with our weaknesses. Unsafe people, however, confront us not to forgive us, but to condemn and punish us. They remove their love until we are appropriately chastened. This obviously destroys any chance for connection and safety. And I think we've seen that going on with a few people on here, where people just do not forgive. They cannot let things go. They constantly got to bring it up. Yeah, but you did this. You remember when you did that. Remember how you said that. You're not a safe person. You can't change. We haven't seen change. That's not me. So if that's you, that's your thing. It's not my thing. I'm a safe person. I'm a forgiving person, as far as I'm concerned. However, sometimes I have to put up boundaries with people to be safe myself. There is that balance there, like I said. All right. I got to see how many more of these pages are, because I may have to chop this one in half. That's not that bad. Number 6. Unsafe people stay in parent-child roles instead of relating as equals. Old Mr. Peters, the father of one of my best childhood buddies, had a saying he'd often repeat to us. I agree with what you're saying, but I don't agree with your right to say it. Now, you had to be listening to that one to catch it. It sounded so much like the old agreeing to disagree line. And when he'd see us cock our heads quizzically, like confused puppies, he'd laugh, knowing he'd gotten us. Mr. Peters' play on words, however, describes the next issue very well. Safe people respect our right to make decisions and adult choices. Unsafe people resist our adult functioning. They don't agree with our right to an opinion, a value, or a decision. Unsafe people react to our adultness by withdrawing from it. This is the opposite of how safe people relate to us. Safe individuals love to see us grow up and mature. They rejoice when we carry out our responsibility to fill the earth and subdue it. Genesis 1:28. They want to see us develop our God-given gifts and talents and use them. Safe people love to see adults being formed. This is true in all relationships, especially in parenting. When the Bible tells us to train a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not turn from it, this doesn't mean that you should decide where the child is to go. Instead, you should help the child discover God's path for her or him, even if that means a path you might not have chosen. The same is true in our friendships. Your closest relationships are at times actively working either for or against your growth. In the list below, the first 2 ways of relating hinder your growth, and the last one encourages it. So here we go. The first 2 are, I feel like a kid around them. I feel like I have to be their parent. And the third one is, I feel equal with them. These 2 are the bad ones. Third one is the good one. So let's explore this. I feel like a kid around them. In this first type of relationship, you often feel controlled or criticized. The parental person acts as if you can't make decisions for yourself regarding values, money, job, theology, sex, or politics. He feels resentful when you attempt any major decisions without his approval. So he withholds approval of your decisions until you again resign yourself to being his child, even if you're in the middle age years. Authority roles often lend themselves to these kind of dynamics. For examples, bosses, teachers, doctors, and police often act parental, as in the boss put me down again and made me feel like a child. It's important to separate roles from character here. While some parental types do seek out roles where there's people around, some just want to do their job or do a good job. Here are things to look for in the parental person. He gives me advice without asking if I want it. He doesn't trust my judgment. He thinks I need his help in navigating through life. He is critical. He is disapproving. He withdraws when I make adult decisions with which he disagrees, or she. Now, suppose you are exquisitely sensitive to critical people. When they confront you, you immediately question your decisions. Put this character problem with a parental type person, and you have major problems. I feel like I have to be their parent. You can also have the opposite type of relationship. Here, the roles are reversed. You're trying to relate to a person who wants you to be the parent. Here's a hint that there's a problem. They are neither under 18 years old nor under your legal guardianship. Been on both ends, and I'll explain in a minute. With this second subtype of unsafety, your friend is afraid of adulthood with its responsibility and risks. Can't fault him for that, but the problem emerges in what he or she sees as your role. You become either the approval-providing parent or the authoritarian controller in his head. For example, he may pressure you to tell him what to do, what clothes to buy, where to work, what women to date. He may ask you to interpret the Bible for him. On the other hand, he may act like a rebellious adolescent around you, constantly challenging you and accusing you of being controlling. Neither of these child positions are mature. Both are unsafe. One is over-compliant and one is overreactive, and they can hurt you by not allowing you simply to be an adult. You be you and I'll be me, and we'll respect each other. There's always a power struggle going on here. Okay, I'm going to talk about these first two before I go on with the last one. And then I may have to stop because I got to get back to work, and then I'll do a part 2. So I feel like a kid around them. A past mentor in my life and I and this other lady took a canoe trip. In the canoe, the one lady who was very controlling and very insecure said to my mentor, okay, you get at the front of the canoe and I'll get at the back and I'll bring up the rear and I'll make sure the canoe doesn't tip over. And Laura, you go sit in the middle like the little kid. And I complied because, well, there's a lot of reasons I complied. It was a scary situation. I had no way home. I did not drive there. I flew a plane. My mentor had picked me up in a car. I was sort of trapped with these people that I really didn't know that well, that incidentally, interestingly enough, I met online. So here I am sitting in the middle of the canoe, feeling like this little girl again, just watching the scenery go by and just thinking like the person in the front was my mother and the lady in the back was my father. That's what it felt like, and that's how they treated me the entire visit at this cabin. So I know what it feels like to be parented by adults. I was in my 30s, by the way. Remember what it said here about the problem being that the person is neither under that authority of those people or they are not under the age of 18? Yeah, I lived that role and it was very weird, let me tell you. But I complied with it because, like I said, I was scared. I didn't know these people. I was trapped. I had no way out. I did not have a car to get home. I felt very, very isolated and alone. And there were a lot of other weird things going on that I will not get into because I've gotten into it in other videotapes and I'm not sure if they're still up there, but maybe in the future, who knows. But it was a weird situation and I allowed myself to be in it because I was scared and felt trapped. So there's the first part. That's not healthy. Do not do that. The second part, feeling like I have to be somebody's parent. I had somebody come to my house at one point who was raised by a narcissistic egg donor, as I call them. I don't consider this person's mother to be a mother. They are an egg donor. They were not worthy to be called a mother for what they put this person through. And this person came to my house and wanted me to hold them in my arms and treat them like a little girl. And yeah, it was not comfortable. This person was in her 50s, late 50s, and I was in my 40s, I think. I'm not really sure the timeline, but it just was not comfortable. It was not healthy. I had to nix it real quick. That is one of the problems of being a life coach, too. You deal with a lot of people that have a lot of really deep issues and need to be parented. And if you are the type of person that's looking for that type of situation and you're trained to do that kind of thing, then go for it. But I was not, and I was not comfortable with it. And that's just not healthy. It was very out of balance. So there you go. There's two examples from my own life that were totally out of whack and totally weird and disturbing. And yeah, so anyway, happy ending to that story. Both stories, really. The first one, I don't know what happened to the one that played the father role in the canoe, but I do know the one that played the mother role is remarried, doing well, seems to be happy in her life. So that turned out good. And in the second scenario, that lady that was very clingy and wanted to be kind of babied by me is now a brilliant photographer, extremely talented, very mature, and grew through my life coaching, believe it or not, and some other experiences in her own life. And I'm super proud of her, and kudos to her. So now here's the balance scenario. I feel equal with them. The safe person doesn't make you become either a child or a parent. He takes ownership in his life, of his life, talents, and values. He wants to seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness, Matthew 6:33, on his own, but with your consultation, not your approval. And he wants you to flourish in your life without needing his approval, even if you disagree. You know you're around a safe adult person by the following characteristics. She's not threatened by your differences. She has standards, values, and convictions she's worked out for herself. At the same time, she doesn't have a right way and a wrong way for everything. She functions at least on the same level of maturity as her same age peers. She appreciates mystery and the unknown. She encourages me to develop my own values. Remember that we want our efforts to be approved by God, 2 Timothy 2:15, not people. Find people who want the same goal for you. So when you go into a chat room on here or a group in real life, and the person's screaming and yelling and cussing at people that disagree with their opinion, are they a safe person? I will let you answer that for yourself. Or when you go to say something that maybe you don't understand what's going on in the chat room and you automatically are blocked or silenced, is that a safe person? Again, let you figure that out for yourself. All right, let me check something real quick because I might have to stop here. Yep, I think I'm going to stop here. And on the next video, we're going to talk about how unsafe people are unstable over time instead of being consistent. All right, thank you for listening. Please excuse my lisp. I have a really bad problem with that. I notice it, and as soon as I start noticing it, I become self-conscious of it, and then I do it more. And it irritates the crud out of me, and I hear it myself, and I know I do it. I hate lisping. I don't like Drew Barrymore for the same reason. She has a lisp, and it reminds me that I have a lisp. And it's not that I don't like her. I just don't like hearing lisps. It bothers me because I have such a bad one. And even when Go Lightly did the parody of me, she did my lisp, although she did a really good job. It still tickles me to watch that when I can see it. But yeah, so that's a flaw in me. Unfortunately, I've had it since I was a kid. And the more I think about it, the more it bothers me. So anyways, I guess that's that on this chapter, just being vulnerable with you for a minute there. So stay tuned for part 2 of chapter 3 of Safe People. I probably will do it a little bit later if I feel up to it, or maybe tomorrow. We'll see. I make no guarantees. But hope you enjoyed this so far and that you'll tune in for part 2. Thanks for watching. God bless you. And remember to hang around safe people. Have a great day.